Hello and welcome. He's been shaped by a mix of influences, from Christianity and Shia Islam to French upbringing and Lebanese roots, giving his acting an intensity that has caught the eye of Hollywood. This week on One on One, meet Arab actor and scriptwriter Karim Saleh. He was born in 1978 in Lyon, France, to Lebanese parents with a family history in politics. In fact, his grandparents, Nohad and Antoine Souaid, were both members of Lebanon's government, she being the first woman in the Lebanese parliament. Acting and performing was in his blood from an early age, although there was little upheaval as the family moved from France to Lebanon in the middle of the country's bitter civil war. For the young Karim Saleh, it was an immersion into his Arabic roots, something that would serve him well later as a performer. Soon after starting his acting career at the age of 22, Saleh had notched up some notable performances, including a part in Steven Spielberg's haunting movie Munich and an appearance as a Saracen messenger in Kingdom of Heaven.
The Sultan demands the return of his sister's body, the heads of those responsible, and the surrender of Jerusalem.
In spite of the generally stereotypical roles created for Arabs in Hollywood, Saleh remains optimistic that that will change and he will have a chance to take on some diverse and challenging parts that test his acting skills. Karim, thanks for your time. It's good to talk with you.
Thank you.
Now, you've got a great start in acting early on. Are you finding the kind of roles you want? Are you enjoying the kind of range that you'd like to touch?
I am with a compromise. I'm finding the range, but I'm not finding the characters that I'm interested in. Because I played, for example, I was able to play a terrorist. I was Joshua in the Ten Commandments. I played this young Iraqi intellectual in this film here in Dubai. I was a translator for a paranormal team. There's enough of a stretch in what I've been doing. But there isn't yet characters that I can live with, so to speak. All these characters I have to wear and get out of as soon as possible. I'm looking for somebody I'd like to have coffee with, play someone I would sit down and talk to.
Interesting, you know, the thing about the terrorist, it's an issue that many people have had to face, especially coming from a particular background, being a young Arab, for example. It's almost the danger of being stereotyped. Do you have to be careful when taking that kind of role?
Careful when taking it and careful when playing it, because there's a fine line. You always want to be on your character's side. I think it's very difficult to play against your character. If you lean too much on a character, and it's very difficult to know terrorists. I've never met one and I've never spoken with one. So the idea is not to fall in love with your character, but it's to keep defending the character. So once you've made the difficult choice of playing a terrorist, the difficulty is in finding the way to play him, be realistic, also defend him, and this way he's possible and alive.
It's difficult, especially in places such as the Middle East, where, of course, the word terrorist for many people doesn't ring true. For them, it's a freedom fighter, or they feel that there's... So do you find yourself getting into political debates with people over what the role represents?
I've been in situations where I felt that the people that were talking about the character that I portrayed were sympathetic towards the character in a way that was bothering to me, that bothered me, and in a way that was challenging, because I was worried. I was worried to confront them, but it was never about the terminology. I think the issue around the terminology is more political. I think that the thing with me, the idea is I have to tell those people that they can't show me that they love me because I played this character, and then it's a matter of me defending myself and separating myself from the character, more than it is about defining the word terrorist. Because I think in a way, when I played Ziad Jarrah, the idea was to show Ziad Jarrah from his own point of view. So to some people, he became sympathetic. For me, it's easy to play him without falling in love with him, but for them it was a different story, and I had to separate myself from Ziad Jarrah, and that was complicated.
You and I had a wonderful chat off camera about how your mind works, my mind works, and so on. And you were explaining how your mind, it's sort of functioning on multi-levels. And that you actually find often acting, once you actually immerse yourself into your role, it allows you to clear away all the stresses either side of the acting.
I think I started acting because I needed therapy, really. And I think what it does is it keeps me busy. when I'm acting, I'm busy. My mouth is busy, the words are busy, my brain is busy, my feet are busy finding the mark, and I'm busy serving the whole purpose of the film. And this activity allows me to separate from myself, and this separation creates a space in which I feel, this is the space where I feel the most comfortable. And I seek acting because I seek this space.
Let's take you through your early childhood. You were born in France, but you moved to Lebanon, still when you were relatively quite young. How was that adjustment?
I have no idea why my parents decided to move to Lebanon in the middle of the civil war. I mean, I keep asking them the question, and I think I'm beginning to understand. What my parents wanted me to have were roots. And my father is a Lebanese immigrant. He was born in Africa, and he didn't have any roots. He didn't speak Arabic. He didn't know where he was from. So I think my whole parents' objective was to bring us back to Lebanon, even if it was war, even if it was slightly difficult or risky for us to grow up there. But they wanted us to get a real sense of where we came from. And I think my whole first 10 years were about who I am and who my parents are, and about identity. This is what we were trying to get together as a family.
Even more complicated by the fact your mother was Maronite Christian, your father was Shia.
Yeah.
So that must have really made it difficult at that time.
Well, it made it complicated, and it also made it complicated with their families. Although there was always respect and love amongst everybody, and sort of in the extended family, the two families put together. But both of them were on the common ground of atheism and rationalism, and they were sort of left-wing, very rational atheists.
In fact, your father taught evolution through science, didn't he?
Yeah, my father told us that, that God didn't exist and that the world was created by an explosion in space, and started trying to explain Darwin to us. And we had a sort of, instead of religion, we had the Discovery Channel.
And this is all in the middle of a war.
And this is in the middle of civil war, yeah.
How was your relationship with your parents?
It was difficult to get my father to step out of his rational role, yeah, and it was difficult to get my mother to come down from her emotional state, and she was very scared during the war and very bothered by what was going on. So I guess it was a matter of protecting myself from them, but also needing them tremendously.
But you also had the sort of history, the family history. Your grandmother was, I think, the first Lebanese woman in the parliament. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sure one of the first, but I think the first, yeah.
And that sort of had its own issues, because you had security, you had all other issues surrounding that, yeah?
When we used to live in West Beirut, which is the Muslim part of Beirut when Beirut was split in two, and we used to flee to my grandmother's side in the Christian area. So my grandmother is Christian, and she's a Christian politician, and it was safer during the Civil War in the Christian area until up to 1988, when the Christians began killing each other. So we constantly had to play that game of slightly adjusting our behavior and our personalities to where we were located, and depending on whom we were talking to. My grandmother, it was a very nice environment, but there were bodyguards, and at the time a lot of the Lebanese youth was fighting and involved in wars. So I was surrounded with people that I knew as a child had murdered other people and had fought. And it was a sort of a tricky situation. And as a kid, you have a sort of instinctive sense of justice. You feel naturally that you're against war, unless you're being brainwashed by someone. But when you're left to your child's instinct, you're against violence. So having to deal with people that are participating in war, and having to be polite to them, and even having to understand and sometimes even depend on them, I think was an exercise in compassion and empathy.
How did that experience, though, that having to be almost like a religious political chameleon going between East and West, and knowing these people who had their own deeper issues such as killing and so on, how did that affect your character, do you think?
It made me malleable. And it forced an openness of mind upon me at a time when I was still trying to find out who I was. And in Beirut, and in Lebanon in general, there is this double identity, this whole question of how Western are we, how Oriental are we? And I was asking myself, how atheist am I, how mystical am I, how Christian, how Muslim, and then how peaceful, how violent. So being constantly pulled between two poles, and not wanting to grow to be completely bipolar or schizophrenic, the idea was to be able to survive in the stretch, so to become as malleable as possible. But it was very difficult for me in the beginning to build a solid sense of who I was.
Interesting also that, you met some strange characters. I think a bodyguard who collected ears.
Yeah, and then you have to go to lunch and shake his hand. I mean, that's the weird thing. And my mother and my aunts were telling me very recently that they are terrified by the guy. But he's there, and he's part of the help in the household. So he carries trays and will bring you coffee and will participate in any family gathering or meal. And he's human. He smiles and he's gentle. And because he works with my grandmother and the bodyguards, I'm protected by him in a way. But I know deep down that this man
has a dark side.
And he's inhabited my worst nightmare, but he's done it in his life.
When did the acting really come into your life? Where did it begin?
I think it started when I was young as a defense mechanism, but I think all kids do it. When it became, I was slightly confused as a teenager. I didn't know whether I wanted to write or whether I wanted to dance or whether I wanted to sing. When I was 16, 17, I was involved in a school play. And this is when it hit me. And I didn't like my own writings. When I read anything I wrote, I didn't like it. I went to school, and for 3 days I tried to study directing. And I knew that what I needed to do wasn't to work on a camera, and didn't want to do anything technical. I wanted to dive into myself, free myself, and then come back out again. I wanted to work with myself. And this is why a lot of people say actors are egocentrical, but it was a need. It wasn't vanity or anything. It was a need. I needed to go through it, through that process.
Did you adjust to it easily?
No. No, it took me a lot of time to accept the fact that I had chosen this as a profession. That was complicated. And I was terrified of being bad. And there was no guarantee that I was going to be any good, and there still aren't any guarantees that I'm any good. It's always up to what's happening in the moment. And I remember when I started, and it's very difficult to tell your parents, this is what I'm going to do for a living. How is that ever true?
Yeah,
and
true.
I was terrified. I remember I used to bargain with myself and look at Hamlet and say, I'm going to go tomorrow. I went to drama school in London. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to try this Hamlet monologue. If I fail, I'm quitting. And I'd fail, and I wouldn't be able to quit. And I had this sort of love-hate relationship with acting for years, which eventually got me kicked out of drama school.
We'll find out more about what happened to your career in a moment, though. Stay with us. We're going to have some more one-on-one with Karim in just a moment.